What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. With a few days of playtime in Season 10, I think I'm figuring out venture meta and the common themes that are going to take you far if you understand some of the hero interactions. Gotta say, not a huge fan of this balance patch. I didn't like the mid-season balance patch in Season 9, and Season 10, it's a bit more of the same. While they tweaked a number of things, it's not substantially different other than the fact that venture has been added. First, let's take a look at the changes they did make to them. They sort of switched the burst damage away from drill dash and clobber and put it into damage over time. So you need to maintain on that target when using drill dash or clobber to do the same amount of damage you did before, but still the same overall. So you'll still be able to secure damage on squishies with the combos and rack up lots of damage on specific tanks. 30% less vertical knockback on the tectonic shock. But overall, venture is a character that is good at either all-inning on squishies or being completely obnoxious against tanks. Tank experience is going downhill fast and getting even worse in Season 10 because crowd control is at a premium. The best things in the game right now, to me, are either burst damage or crowd control. And the reason is venture, I do think, is very, very good. If you master them, you could even consider them an S tier pick, but I think I've noticed a lot of players really struggling with the cooldown cycle or getting them to work. And if you feed or make a mistake or aren't good at that playstyle, then they'll be a lot worse and actually counterable by CC and burst damage. But if you're good, it goes definitely up. And I think there's going to be a lot of ventures dominating the ladder up until like a higher rank. Very, very similar to the personality of Overwatch 1 Doomfist, if you recall. Doomfist was a character in Overwatch 1 that high tier players did not really struggle up against, but once the community realizes how easy it is to get these melee combos for most of the tiers of play, I think venture is going to be very, very strong. Today's video sponsor is HelloFresh. America's #1 meal kit keeps getting better. I love HelloFresh because the process of meal planning and shopping can be a drain on both time and energy. I'd rather be gaming. Planning out what to cook is annoying to me, but HelloFresh takes the guesswork out of it by giving you a selection of tasty recipes to choose from. Just because we're gamers doesn't mean we have to eat worse food. HelloFresh will help you have more time for gaming while eating healthier. HelloFresh will help you skip all of the annoyances of meal planning. You'll get to select from over 45 different meals with different dietary options for you, and the fresh ingredients will be shipped right to your door. And with the pre-portioned ingredients, there's no waste. It's going to be less than grocery shopping and up to 25% less than takeout. Whether you're looking to lose a few pounds or gain some peace of mind, try out HelloFresh's easy-to-follow recipes today. You can click the link in the description or use my code and get 10 free meals and free desserts for life while your subscription is active. Life is stressful and hectic. Cooking shouldn't be. Try out HelloFresh today. Click my link, and I think you're going to like it. In the DPS category, we might consider any disables, such as Cassidy or Sombra, to be really good answers because you can hit them with a disable as they're trying to go underground, and those are good answers. But as well, venture's interesting a bit because they don't have to only go all in. They actually can play to peel. So another thing that's really good right now in the meta is greedy backline characters, which I would consider Cass or even Widowmaker, who I'm also going to put in the A tier. These characters that are super high payoff but normally are easy to dive are more protectable because we have a new DPS character that has insane crowd control, right? Because you can crowd control the tank while underground safely or drill dash and clobber them to do lots of damage. There's many tanks that are going to struggle to do enough burst damage to venture and just will stand there taking a beating while venture gets extra health and adds quite a lot of damage to them. So we're going to go through the tanks later, I think, but characters like Winston, Diva, these sustained damage characters that have moderate damage but won't have the fast enough time to kill just can't contest the venture, and it feels really goatsy. Like venture is another tanky style DPS pick, similar to the likes of Reaper or Bastion that are really difficult for a lot of tanks to deal with. But venture has the skill expression to go in and out in ways that those picks usually can't, and also have the flexibility at different matchups. Venture does have some weaknesses though that we'll talk about in a little bit, like in the tank category, but in general, that's like the theme that you'll always get away with, I think, and having a pretty decent time. We'll talk about the tanks a little bit later. Okay, so if those are the general rules of the meta, burst damage, disables, characters that don't have those things are going to be a heck of a lot worse overall. It's going to be pretty difficult, I think, to play some otherwise ranked pub stomper picks like Genji, for example. Tracer is still going to have dominant matchups, but let's say you play Genji Tracer and you can't quite get in on the supports properly and they're healing. Meanwhile, the Venture goes in and you're not able to punish with disables or burst. The Venture might be able to melee combo kill certain things while you kind of razzle dazzle and get maybe like the Brig Inspire healing outdoing all of your damage. You would have to play to commit in hard for burst kills in close range with these flankers. Don't expect to like poke and prod too much because it won't be dealing enough damage. Meanwhile, the Venture goes all in and out, able to secure picks similar to Overwatch 1 Doomfist, of course. With those rules for the meta, we can begin populating the rest of the tier list, and I do want to reorganize this a bit, but I just want to get some of the general themes out there. If you're the type of character that needs to do sustained damage over time, you're a lot worse, and if you can either burst impact with damage or disables, you're a lot better overall. All right, put a lot more thought into this, and I think the A tier is secure, where I do consider Venture right alongside Tracer as possibly one of the best DPS in the game. The reason is the new matchups and team comps you could make in the brawly control style is extra dominant when you figure that out. And I think once players start playing around like a key carry piece in your team comp and then build sustain protection around them, Venture is a piece to do that, or has the flexibility to go aggressive. I do rank them as the best DPS, I guess, mainly because they're easier to play, I think, than a lot of these other picks and get equal pick-off value. They can get either value by manipulating the front line or getting picks. Venture is insane in my opinion. The rest of the A tier is dominated by the maps and matchups that get created. The Widowmaker maps are super dominant for her yet again due to the protection principle that you can make with team comps now that there's a new DPS pick that is so anti-dive in a way. Because remember how crowd control in Overwatch works, guys. Once you apply a bit of crowd control, the follow-up successive crowd control you could add is easier and easier to hit because the enemy's losing more and more space. So having a DPS pick that CCs the enemy tank out of the way or puts them where you want, the other crowd controls are easily stacked on top of each other. This is very reminiscent of problems that we had in Overwatch 1. Not a huge fan of the direction it's going. Then on top of that, you might feel like it's very difficult to kill anything if your hero doesn't have enough burst damage and you're sort of just poking and prodding for not much value at all. So your hero either needs to hold ground and deny space or deal high amounts of burst damage, in my opinion. Now looking at the B tier, I'm going to put Sombra at the top because she's not dominant enough to compare to the carry potential of everything in the A tier, in my opinion, and you need the right matchup. They either can deny the enemy's Venture or harass the tank. A lot of plays to be made, and in a crowd control stacking meta, having EMP to stack into other disables is really good. Sombra, stable, does the job. For a few moments, I considered putting the flyer heroes a little bit higher on the list because Venture doesn't interact with them. But if you look at the rest of the tier list, like having Widow or Cassidy and a lot of the supports as well, the flyer characters, if you're a specialist at them, maybe you do better this meta thanks to a lot of players playing Venture, but they go underground to dodge your attacks and have the mobility to go in the air potentially as well. Remember, we don't have skybox fire anymore. We have flankers that go up and down, in and out of the fight, and are targetable and are pretty fair. Whereas Echo copying Venture is pretty insane. Lots of value there. I just don't think they're dominant enough or as easy to play. They don't get their kills on other squishies as easy as Venture can. Meanwhile, they are really manipulating the tank even better than these guys can. Genji can get value out of Nanoblade again because I do think Ana's pretty decent in this really controlled, slow, high value required type meta, but a lot of other matchups are mediocre for him. He's not going to have the same mid-fight pop-off value as Venture or Tracer or any of these picks, right? Like in the mid-fight, Genji's a bit harder to play. If you're a specialist, you can get that to work, but Venture, just like Overwatch 1 Doomfist, is a bit easier to play than Genji oftentimes and is going to be fragging a little bit faster than you, I think. The rest of the B tier, I'd say if you're not getting countered or you have a good map and matchup, decent heroes, going to be somewhat reliable. You'll either be able to go at the enemy tank or just have sustained value over time, but not as good as the A tier picks. The last DPS on the roster, down in the C tier, I'm going to say you're going to really need to be confident in both your play, execution, and the matchup to expect to get value out of these. While Junk in theory has burst damage, it's not enough usually to actually get burst kills, so all of them kind of play play a little bit more sustainy, and you really need high accuracy to get burst damage out of them. It's still possible, but I think it's pretty clear if you look at the tier list how in the new Season 10 metagame, you can expect these C-tier heroes to get vastly outpaced by the A-tier heroes most of the time. I will note the map pool and the popularity of other heroes at your given rank might adjust this. If you have the aim specialized in any of them, you can pop off, but I just don't think they have the base interactions to start learning them this season and expecting to do very well. The damage category got 2 patches in Season 10. Virus does a little bit less damage overall. Tracer gets some nerfs. Recall is on 1 second longer cooldown, and Pulse Bomb is harder to hit. None of this changed the placing for them, in my opinion. They both do the same things they always did. The tank role did get several key changes. The big rework to Wrecking Ball came through, which makes him more reliable in a number of different ways. So Grappling Claw allows you to retract. So if you attach and don't like the arc you're on or want to adjust it or even use it to kind of like skill shot hit someone as you're swinging along, a lot more control on the Grappling Claw. Also, it has a 1 second cooldown only if you attach it and then detach it without getting the fireball enacted. So if you don't like the connection point you made, you're allowed to kind of like fix it so that you're just more reliable in your engagements overall and you're not like completely whiffing them entirely. Minefield gets more health, not a big deal, but adaptive shield can be given to your allies, capping at 75 per person, which means if you engage in, get a big shield and the enemy's not targeting you, you can give your shields to your teammates. That's how I suggest you use it. Don't just always do it. Often they will target the tank anyway, so most of the time to me it feels like not really necessary to use, but the few times you can do it and buff your teammates, it's a huge boon to your Wrecking Ball performance for sure, because there's just multiple ways now that the tank is just more reliable than he was before. Overall, massive buffs, I would say, because whiffing those engagements or getting a bad shield was an all-in whiff from your tank, and tank value is really secured and reliable in Overwatch 2, so now he fits into that mold a lot better. Also, probably the biggest raw stat buff to the entire series of patch notes for Wrecking Ball is the detection radius on adaptive shield is now 13 meters, okay? And it's in a radius, right? So 13 meters is huge. Very, very easy to use now. That's going to change Ball's power level significantly. Sigma experimental barrier movement speed goes up to 20 meters. Not a huge deal in my opinion, a non-change. Earth Shatter gets a massive buff. I also think Ryan is better than you might think in this meta because some of the better characters don't necessarily have great shield break. Like, it's not really a shield break type meta game. Yes, Reinhardt can get screwed by a lot of things in the game. As always, a lot of tanks can, but Ryan's more stable than you might realize. Because remember how the meta is working. You want burst damage, self-sustain? Well, Reinhardt can get burst damage with a pin or Earth Shatter now and just kind of sustain and brawl. So he's a bit better than you might think. Queen's impact damage on Carnage goes up to 105, important buff, and Doomfist, the empowered punch, is no longer consumed when the windup is canceled by using Seismic Slam or Power Block. A bit of a quality of life change that makes him more reliable. Okay, let's get on to the tank tier list now. If we kind of defined the metagame based on the burst damage or sustain, that's still going to count for the tank category as well. So we either need to be able to be durable for the CCs that could be hitting us or deal them out ourselves. So we're going to start off talking about that. I do really rate these CC tanks. Orisa, a lot of sustain against lots of things. Hog, huge burst potential and damage denial. Queen, tons of skill expression. All three of these tanks are really, really good. Zarya, we're going to toss in here as, you know, tank category is a lot about counter picks. So depending on your skill level with any of these, you can kind of shift them around. But the point is, tank in Overwatch 2 is a counter pickathon. So it's not really like we're going to expect to be able to stay on any of these tank picks for any given amount of time. If the enemy counters us either with their DPS picks, if the enemy counters us with their squishies or their tank, we might want to consider swapping. Overall, I think the tank category is a little bit like, don't get yourself countered and try to do your best. Like, I think tanking sucks in Season 10. It's like really bad because there's certain characters you just can't kill, and it's a lot about like sustaining the team fight over time and trying to carry with your ultimate like it was in other sustainy brawly metas in Overwatch 1. So with that being the case, we're going to populate the rest of the tier list. Okay, now let's look at the entire tank category. These top three, Orisa, Hog, Zarya, either have the sustain on themselves when targeted or have the burst potential to punish Venture and the enemy coming at you. Overall, as tank, if you play too aggressively on characters that don't have super high sustain, like Ball and Doomfist, then you're just going to get punished. You get CC'd back in, and it's going to be a horrible time. So holding the front line and brawling it up and dealing spike damage with either one of these two, or working up to high charge as Zarya, I think this is like the easy standard sustain in the front line position where you can look back at your team, give them resources, work up to value with your ultimate. That's kind of how tank's working right now. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, I've got Winston and Ram, heroes that I love, pretty low on the tier list, because if you have moderate tier damage, you are going to struggle to ever kill Venture at any point. They can just dig underground while you kind of whiff at them, not doing much. And then otherwise, the big amounts of sustain and their CCs onto you can chain CC you if you ever try to go aggressive. So if you have to play too passively, which I think you do on a few of these tanks, you'd rather just play a slower tank with higher damage numbers, or alternatively, an even more aggressive tank. So Doom, Wrecking Ball, Queen, these are tank heroes that have high burst damage and a burst of sustain to help themselves that can go in aggressively. You might think, well, there's lots of CCs, so Ball and Doomfist should be getting disrupted. Well, they come in with such hyper dive playstyles, they don't stay in for long and their damage hits immediately. It's more about hitting enough damage on the engage for it to matter, whereas Winston needing to zap down Adventure for 10 seconds is not good enough. Ball now has the flexibility that I do put him above Doomfist. They're kind of equivalent characters now, I think. It was for the longest time that I would have rated Doomfist as higher peak potential because of the skill expression, but now they've just added more skill expression elements to Wrecking Ball, and I think he's a bit easier to play. Queen just got a buff as well, so against certain matchups, as long as you're not getting countered as Queen, super high carry potential out of that. Now getting into the C tier of tanks, discuss these a little bit more. Sigma is still going to be great on the sniper maps, adding a shield and burst damage, but again, his damage kind of takes some time. He doesn't have one-shot kill combos anymore. He plays really slow. His ultimate is pretty good, but I think I'm mainly just holding him this high because there's enough sniper maps, and I do think Widow meta is back again as we put her quite high. So if you don't have a Sig and the enemy is playing Widow, a lot of the other tank comps are going to get rolled by that Widow dominating. So pick Sig, put a shield in the way, or alternatively, Reinhardt really good, putting a shield in the way, running over Sig. And with that Earth Shatter buff, there's a lot of times where you're going to be able to play on the objective, work up to Earth Shatter and carry that way, but just not as much mid-fight damage as a lot of these other picks as well. It depends on the matchup specifically. Like if the enemy is overly reliant on their hit scan picks, the shield can help zone them out for a while you focus the frontline fight, and then maybe get a knockoff pin kill or work up to enough damage with your hammer and fire strike in order to work something down, or at least hold the objective. So that is kind of the way tank plays right now. Tanks are objective bots. Diva counters some things, but is pretty slow. Mauga more easily countered. I think you're just going to be getting headshot and not having a great time overall. The sustained damage kind of requires him to lock into a fight for a while. Not a huge fan of some of these lower damage picks overall in the tank category. We got a handful of support changes in Season 10. Alari's primary fire recovery has increased from 0.2 to 0.25, meaning she fires a little bit slower now than before, but secondary fire heal per second goes up by 10, so a bit better at healing, charging ult faster, but not the rapid fire primary fire as before. Lucio gets his damage rearranged a little bit, where the sonic amplifier damage per projectile goes down a bit. This is pretty significant, but because the headshots were so easy to hit, Lucio was certainly dominant at higher tiers of play, but instead that damage is being exchanged for more damage on the boop ability, which overall, I think Lucio's still kind of where he was before, just you won't be getting some of the insane sniper kills that you could get. Like lining up headshots on an Ashe, Ana, Widowmaker was insane with his sonic amplifier before. Now you just need a little bit more aim to do the same job, but Lucio, pretty reliable of a pick. Lifeweaver got significant buffs, where rejuvenating dash heal has increased from 50 to 60. In Tree of Life, pulse healing increases from 75 to 90, making that ultimate significantly better. Lifeweaver, a bit of a sleeper pick because he's one of those protection style supports that is going to keep alive a all-in risky backliner pick. Lifeweaver viable for that reason. We'll get into that. Moira finally gets somewhat of a nerf where the Biotic Grasp damage per second decreases ever so slightly by 5, 65 down to 60 now, and Coalescent self-heal per second has increased from 50 to 55. Yikes. Well, did anybody even heal with Cole? Does that even matter? Probably not. Well, yeah, the heal goes up. It's a bit better as an ultimate fight, I guess, but overall, Cole was most insane for its damage, and, well, healing with it is pretty strong. So I think this number does tend to add up over time because Moira is a character that does need to zap you down for a while, so it is impactful in my experience, even though it doesn't look like much because her damage is so slow. Knocking it down by 5 per second when Moira battles last 5 seconds to begin with, like that kind of matters, right? So Moira significantly lower carry potential when DPSing. You have to play to heal a little bit more now. All right, onto the support hero tier list. Support is a pretty viable role, as in most of the supports are going to contribute and do the job I feel they're supposed to, but I'm going to say high value supports are at a premium now again and do the most overall. I might even put Illari a bit higher, but if you're playing an Ana and set her up, the healing values are kind of nuts right now. If we talked about the general themes of the meta of it being hard to aggress in overall, with a disable on Ana, a boop from both Illari and Zen, these characters add to the CC chain. They have something to contribute. And if you have, let's say, a Venture helping protect those dive lanes against you, well, they just kind of get more value over time than a lot of other picks. And what I've seen happen is if the enemy tries to play aggressive into you and you get value out of these, you're going to have a really good time. The way Season 10 has been playing in my experience is that there's a few characters that are contributing most of the value, and then you might want to consider protection characters just to ensure that your win condition stays alive, whether that's your Widowmaker, Zen, Ana, those types of picks. Playing the support characters that are really good at peeling and control are pretty good. Lifeweaver's healing numbers are kind of nuts now. Brig can be brawly on the front line and add another tank presence. Lucio, more so in his defensive posture rather than going aggressive. If aggression was better, we might put him higher on the tier list, but I'm going to lean him just a little bit more down because he did get nerfed a bit. And one of his best aggressive teammates, Moira, I do think is kind of just mediocre at best. Like, I don't think bad enough to go into C tier, but we're going to leave her nearer the bottom of the tier list. Mercy's solid as well, but you need that carry DPS again, but there is quite a few that are pretty good, whether it's Cassidy, Widowmaker, etc. Mercy's going to be dependent on that hero performing. Batiste offers a whole lot of value in a slower style meta, but I don't think is as dominant as these A tier picks. You want to sort of play around one of them and sort of sustain the team comp while applying pressure. If there's enemy flyers, BAP is pretty good, but overall, I don't think he's as required. And while he has an amazing ultimate, he doesn't quite have the mid-fight carry of these three, so I put him a little bit lower. Last here on the tier list today, we're going to talk about Kiriko, who has the flexibility to move in and out, while these very static style supports have superpowers. Kiri being a flanker who has burst damage and interactions that can cleanse status effects. Remember, there's a lot of CC in the game, so Kiri's going to be quite high. We might even consider putting them right up next to Ana, somewhere in the realm here. It depends on how many maps and matchups and the heroes you play against. Kiri can defend themselves, get away, play vertically against Venture, and deal a lot of damage and win duels on their own right. So I think Kiri's back in a big way, but I don't think necessarily this high. I'll put above Zenyatta. More reliable than Zen for sure. Not as good as these top picks because ultimately, a lot of the CC in the game is also boops. Like, boops being good in the game is part of the issue. It isn't just status effects that cast. It isn't just anti. So Kiri is limited in her capacity to do that, but denying some burst engage value with Suzu is pretty good still. Guys, that's everything for our early Season 10 tier list. What do you think about the meta and how it's shaking up? Not a huge fan personally. I hope they balance some of this because while the game is balanced and a lot of heroes can be played, I think the gameplay is a bit annoying with how counter pick heavy and team comp dependent it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and to support the channel, check out HelloFresh, linked in the description. We appreciate it very much. I hope to see you guys in our live streams. We'll continue to be grinding Season 10, and then of course working on our tank experience video from learning tank in Overwatch 2, which has been somewhat miserable, and it's getting worse over time when they keep adding CC to a game that they said they were going to try to remove CC from. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.